There's probably some other buttons I should have pressed, but I didn't press them, so that's fine. I mean, we can live with those kind of buttons. It's totally fine. Welcome back to Brittlestar's Really Great podcast. And today I'm joined by the ever optimistic, the always smart Dr. Jen Golbeck. And thanks so much for joining us. You're joining us from the side of the road in the
Key
great
Largo,
state of Florida.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So how have you been? Anything new this week?
No, I mean, it's been a real dull week. Everything just going along like normal. I'm not crying right now, so that's
Yeah.
a success. Yeah.
That's good. That's a start. So tell people a little bit about what you do and what you've been doing this past summer specifically.
Yeah, so my regular job is that I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, and I study the intersection of social media and AI and extremism. So I've been looking at the far right for a long time online, and this summer I decided to start going to Trump rallies to compare what I'm seeing in like extremist right-wing American forums to what people were saying in person. So I think I've been to like a dozen Trump rallies this summer, and so it's very immersed in the MAGA movement up through the election, where I got to say, like, I'm a very bad forecaster of what's going to happen in the world, but I did not think he was going to win. And so now kind of, regrouping after the election this week.
So, I mean, what was that experience like being in those rallies? Because, I mean, there's like a cartoonish view of like good guys and bad guys that I think that some people get. And I think that's kind of overlooks the idea that no, these are just most of them are just folk. They're just people. Is that a correct takeaway to say like, no, listen, they're just mostly people, but they're being guided the wrong way? Or is it they're mostly people and they're terrible? Or are they just terrible people? One of the two.
You're going to make me cry already. I thought I'd make it at least like halfway into this before that happened. So, looking at the online spaces, they're very aggressive, violent, vitriolic, they extreme and shocking. Like they do that on purpose on those forums. When you go to the Trump rallies, generally, yeah, they're just people. They're like friendly to your face. They say exactly the same kind of stuff,
Right.
but they're polite. They're happy to have a conversation. So there is this big difference. At the same time, like, in 2016, when Trump got elected, you can go, there are a lot of people who were like lifelong Republican voters. They didn't take him seriously. I mean, I remember going on some radio show back after the election in 2016 and saying like, maybe he'll start tweeting like a president now, maybe once he has the office, he'll be presidential. So we were all a little naive. That's not the case anymore. We have seen him lead an insurrection. We've seen him be convicted of felonies. We've seen all of the rhetoric that he's put out. People support him anyway. And so a question that I and a lot of people I talk to am reckoning with after this election is like, what's your definition of a good person? And what percentage of the American voters are good people, given the decisions that they made this time?
That's pretty heavy. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
when you come out of that with that percentage, are you heartened? Or are you disheartened entirely?
I had suggested maybe 25%, and I'm told I'm
25%
overestimating.
that are not great people. 25%.
No, 25% that are good.
Oh,
Again, it depends on your definition, right? But at least
Okay.
from my perspective, if you are voting for mass deportations,
yeah.
I can't possibly see that as good. There's all kinds of immigration policy that we might disagree on, but
Sure.
just like whatever it means to massively deport 10 to 20 million people and the cruelty that imposes on families, that it would cause for the whole country if he were able to do that. And
Yeah.
even whatever way he manages, right? It's going to be a lot of racial profiling by probably local police and sheriffs that are going to harass all the Hispanic people. Like that's not a thing that I think you can do as a good person to be like, yeah, I think this is a good policy. So everybody who voted for him and everybody who chose not to vote tacitly allowed that to happen.
Yeah.
That's astonishing to me that as Americans, like that's where we are right now.
I've really been kind of consumed because a lot of people are trying to grapple with the fact that he won. And even though I said previously it wasn't a shock that Trump won like it was when he won in 2016, it was still like a, whoa, okay, all right. I wasn't expecting that entirely. Um, and people are grappling with that. People are having a hard time. There's a lot of people who are incredibly emotional about it as well, and with good reason. I think my wife Shannon has been upset about the fact she's like, it feels like women have been told to sit down and shut up again, which is terrible. And I think back even to 2016, the night after Trump was elected, I was sitting having a drink at a bar in Toronto at this event with the like a CEO of a social media platform, and he was almost despondent, and
Yeah,
also saying all of my staff have essentially called in sick today, like no one's coming in.
for sure.
So what I've been trying to sort of comfort myself with the idea that there's an information gap, that there's this idea that there's people who are just blissfully, for now, unaware of almost everything except for what's 6 feet in front of their face. And I was writing this down earlier. I thought, oh, this is clever. I better write this down. I wrote down, everyone lives in a 6-foot bubble, but most people's bubbles are opaque. And they can't see past it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think most people in general, people live in these 6-foot bubbles where it's like, what's happening in life right now is what's happening directly in front of me that I can see, hear, feel, experience in general. And that's kind of where it ends. But if my bubble is clear, I realize there might be some people elsewhere that are having a worse time than I am having. Whereas I think I'm trying to get comforted by the idea, in a sense. I'm not really comforted, I guess, but the only comfort I can kind of grasp for is that there are people who just don't know what's going on and haven't thought anything through. They see, the reason you're not rich is because of a whole bunch of immigration issues and migrants and undocumented migrants. And it's like, okay, well, we get rid of those people, then I'll be rich, right? It's like, well, no, things won't pan out like that. Is that kind of your take as well? Like, especially being to the rallies, did you sort of come away through yourself thinking, okay, these people just don't know?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. One of the things that stood out to me most at the rallies is how universally everybody I talked to, and I talked to a ton of people, they were thrilled to talk to me and like ask if they were going to be in the paper because I look like a journalist. And every single
which is hilarious because
them,
you're thinking to yourself, when's the last time you read a paper? Come on.
and he has these moments, this is an aside, he has these moments in every rally where like all the press are in what they call a pen. It's about 100 feet from the stage, like on the inside. We're literally penned in, and it's TV cameras, all the stand-up people, still photographers, writers, we're all in there. And he points to them halfway through the rally and he's like, look at all the fake news back there. That's a lot of fake news. And everybody in the rally turns and boos and yells at the media. I have a recording on my phone from the Madison Square Garden thing. I'm like, I'm going to get booed by a packed MSG. A thing I never thought would happen in my life. So I have a video of it, So they have all this bad stuff to say about the media, but when you show up with like a fancy camera and press credentials and ask if they want to say something, they're super excited about it.
Yeah, I'm going to be on TV, which is hilarious.
However you work that out. But so with all these people I talked to, a thing that really stood out is how universally they were bought in on misinformation and conspiracy theories. Every single person believes the 2020 election was stolen, or at least they say they do. They believe the stats and all of the like misinformation that Trump spews. So they clearly are either not being well informed or they're rejecting what they're being told. And so that's something that we need to look at, right? Is like, how do we address that problem?
Yeah.
But I think, another part of it is exactly what you hit on, which is like, they just don't understand how a lot of it works. And I haven't been like too deeply online in the last couple days because I'm like, I know this isn't going to be good for me. Right. But I saw a tweet today, however verified you want to give credit to that for being, that said, they were talking about a friend or maybe their husband who works at a manufacturing facility. and how they got pulled together and told that they weren't going to be getting bonuses this year
Right.
because the manufacturing facility was going to have to basically stock as much inventory as they could ahead of the tariffs that Trump has promised that he's going to put in place. And if I were running a manufacturing company, and I come from a family that owns a factory, like they do
Right. Yeah.
manufacturing, I would hope they're doing that, that because
Yeah.
we know how tariffs work,
Yeah.
it's just a tax. And they were astonished. The story in this tweet is that the people who worked there that voted for Trump were astonished because they thought China was going to pay those tariffs instead of us. And like, we've been telling them that all election, right? That these Trump
Yeah.
tariffs are just going to come here. But I do think that's true for a lot of them, regardless of if that story is true. I think people are going to be shocked at what the
Yeah.
impact is.
I think you're right. I think that's exactly what I was thinking. It doesn't really matter if that story specifically is true, but that's essentially in concept, it's accurate. It's accurate in the idea
Yeah.
that, they've been told repeatedly these tariffs that have been touted as a weapon, that yes, they will have an impact as such, but their impact is also going to blow back into the American market and not even just the American market, like the Canadian market, the worldwide market's going to all suffer for it because it's all connected. It's all entirely connected. You're buying, one part of a car becomes more expensive. Well, that becomes tougher on the, automotive industry in Canada, for example, or something.
Yeah.
And is there any getting past? Like, is there any getting past it? Are they going to break from the spell? Do you see that thing recently where Nick Fuentes? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Him saying, I only saw the clip from prior to the election, and him saying the Trumpism is a cult. I didn't realize this until now. I've woken up. I've realized this now. And I don't know if that was just taken wildly out of context or not. But of course, now he's totally bought in back again. And he's saying terrible things like your body, my choice, and all that kind of nonsense.
Yeah.
He's like dirt. It's total dirtbag behavior. But do you think there's like when I saw that clip of Nick Fuentes, I thought to myself, maybe the spell's broken. Maybe people are realizing they've been swindled. But I don't know if that's going to happen, or will it happen? Do you think?
So there's a couple thoughts that I have about that. One is that political science researchers, so colleagues of mine who study this, say that a lot of people don't vote based on policy at all. They don't even care what the policy is.
Right.
They don't like whoever's in charge now. They're just going to vote for the other side. And we saw parts of that playing out here. We see people who support an abortion ban, for example, but also support IVF. But the reason that IVF is at risk in the US is because of the abortion bans, because you get fertilized embryos and then those are humans all of a sudden. You saw across the board people voting for like Democrats in smaller races and then Trump in a bigger race. And those two things cancel themselves out,
Yeah.
So they're just kind of mad at the incumbents. And so they're voting for whoever the other side is, even if that's not going to get them anything. And then they swing back the other way. So I think there is some of that going on. But, I always, to my detriment, I think, try to be really generous in spirit about why people make what I think are poor decisions. And I found myself on like Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, defaulting to saying they don't really understand how bad real authoritarianism is, and they're about to find out. And then I was like, but that's not true, right? Like they know exactly what they voted for in this case. Trump was not ambiguous and he was not invisible. They want it. And that came through to me in the rallies also, that they are really excited for the authoritarianism and they just think that it's not going to hurt them. And I think one of the big problems that, we certainly have to deal with in the US, but that I think is more global is that I'm going so academic here. I'm sorry, but like,
No, it makes me sound smarter. It's great. Go for it.
I think we've gotten to a place in sort of like global and especially American capitalism where you have a lot of money and power concentrated in the hands of a very few ultra rich people. We certainly saw that play out in this election. Everybody else is, I think, legitimately struggling. And I felt that at the rallies, legitimate economic concern that people have. They're struggling. And there's two ways that you can think about that. One is that we should like level the playing field and like raise all ships, right? The other is that I get a sense of power from somewhere, and I'm not going to get $1 billion, but I do have a sense of power if I punish somebody else. I want to see other people suffer because then I feel empowered. And I actually think that's a lot of what's going on with the Trump movement. He certainly is a charismatic figure, but I think if he were to die tomorrow or right after election or right after the inauguration, JD Vance takes over, he's not charismatic. Like, they don't really give a crap about JD Vance.
Right. Interesting.
I don't think the movement would go away because I think there is this appetite, especially among whites, especially among men, especially among white men, that the way that they're going to feel empowered and that they feel that that lack of power is there now is from making other groups suffer. And I think that was a really appealing part of Trump's message. And like, that is a much deeper sickness to get over than just one guy who's kind of a cult-like leader.
It's, oh God,
It's so just bad. It's so
it
bad.
is. I was thinking back to how much relief I felt when in 2020, when you guys elected Biden, and I thought, oh, thank God. I just can't take I remember thinking back to how it was like 4 years of just waking up every morning, immediately checking Twitter to see, is the world ending? And it was just, It sounds like hyperbole now, but of course, I mean, it's like there's every single person I talk to, people who are wildly successful, people who have no concerns and could essentially be those people that kind of live above politics entirely because it will never really affect. They have enough money to skate by. Even those people, I'd connect with them and they'd be like, I'm worried the world's going to end today. This is it. This is gonna, it's all going to go to hell. So I'm just going to have a question here that someone's asked because we're streaming while we're recording at the same time here. I don't know if you can see that or not.
Yep.
So I'm feeling mixtures of feelings regarding the situations. Do you think we should be concerned about women losing a lot of rights, not just reproductive rights?
Oh, for sure. A thing that we have seen kind of repeatedly through history, right, is this move to use laws passed under one guise or another to restrict women's ability to do things. And abortion is one of those, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously there's like the immediate, like, reproductive implication of that, which is horrifying, but it's also like a general move to diminish women's role in society. Because if you're forced to give birth when you don't want to, then your career is limited. Your options for working, your options for education, like those all are limited. And we see that if we compare states that have very strict abortion laws to states that don't, is that women make less money, they get less education, they have fewer opportunities. If you look at like the people who are really pushing the abortion stuff, like some of them sincerely like have a religious belief behind that.
Right.
But a lot of them, like you said, want women to sit down and shut up.
Right.
And I think, what we're going to see, I think about this, like, in my life, all of the men that I have become friends with or, dated in my adult life, 75 or 80% of them have had a girlfriend in their past who had an abortion.
Yeah.
It's an issue that affects both genders. Sure. But the women are the ones who pay the price for it and for that policy. And I think what we're likely to see now is, with the Supreme Court, with how Congress is going to change, is that states who are trying to do things to oppress women are also going to have more luck with that because the federal government's not going to step in and stop it. In fact, might allow it to happen, which could include like criminalization of abortion. So like if you have an abortion, you can go to jail, criminalization of helping people with abortions. There are already states that have proposed those laws. And I think we see them now, and that allows all sorts of other surveillance. So we've seen cases in states that already have draconian abortion laws where women who have miscarriages have been sent to jail. And, do we get Project 2025 has a national pregnancy register, like there's this idea where like, if you get pregnant, you're going to have to register that information so like they can keep track of it. Are we going to have schools monitoring girls' menstrual cycles? And all of that like has this immediate reproductive excuse, but extends far out into diminishing and humiliating and surveilling women in a way that men don't have to suffer under.
There's a lot of, there were some people online who were quite smug being in Canada who were like, well, I'm glad I'm not American, stupid Americans, all that kind of stuff. Well, we have our own issues up here as well. The one thing I'm quite happy about or content with, and I hope it stays the same, is that the issue of abortion is considered healthcare. It's not a political issue. This is not an issue for you and your MP, your member of parliament. This is an issue for you and your doctor. And you guys figure out what the best plan forward is. And I'm happy with that. And I want that to continue. But it's even saying that, of course, it's also a little bit on shaky ground. We have a conservative side here that's kind of said they wouldn't change anything, but they're also entertaining the idea of maybe changing things. And it's all very terrifying, especially when you see, this is just an aside that popped in my head now. People will bring up posts of women in Iran in the 1970s,
Yeah.
and then show them now, and it's like this. It happens. Look how groovy those chicks were, and now this is not the case anymore. So it's terrifying. So what can we? Do you see any hope?
I'm trying to make my way there. It's a little soon. I think the challenge for us in the US is, can we get through the next 4 years? Like, can we come out with the American experiment intact on the other side of another Trump presidency? We did it the first time, but we had a lot of institutions and people of principle in place who tried to stop the worst impulses and efforts of Trump 45. And that's not the case now. He's substantially weakened our institutions. He will have control. He has control over the courts, and may actually have control over both houses of the Senate and the House of Representatives. So both parts of Congress. So those checks are going away. And just the institutions are substantially weaker. So I think there is a huge question. I think there's a huge question of how we come out of that. The way I am a person who responds better when I have a plan and action to try to make things better.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of focusing on two sides of that. One is what's the immediate way to harden our systems and prepare ourselves for what's coming? We have 3 months to get ready, right? I was reading a post by someone, I don't remember off the top of my head, because I wish I could credit her for it, which is what can you do now? And saw the suggestion of stockpiling abortion medication now, which you can get even if you're not going to have an abortion, right? Because if they, this is getting a little U.S. legislative specific, but we have a thing called the Comstock Act, which also was designed to limit women's suffrage, even though that's not what you hear about it. It prevents you from mailing obscenities. So the mail cannot carry obscenities. They use it to prevent the distribution of porn. And one of the big concerns is that without legislation, Trump could say that abortion medication being sent through the mail is now illegal and enforce the Comstock Act against that. So it could make the distribution of abortion medication illegal. So stockpile that now for your friends in case they need it.
And then I mean, it's evident, but I think you're referring to things like Plan B and all that kind of stuff, essentially.
So that will prevent you from getting pregnant.
Right.
But this is the actual medication, mifepristone, maybe. I don't know if I'm
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. See, this is good. This is why I'm asking questions. We need an idiot to ask these questions like me. That's good.
I mean, look, get all the stuff, right? Because they're going to come for birth control also,
right.
In the next 4 years. But certainly stockpiling abortion medication, because that can be limited, I think is an immediate thing. And then I think the question is what can we do, right, to get us through the next 4 years and keep those institutions intact? I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure it out. But we have to figure it out quickly and start doing it, and take advantage of these 3 months we have.
Those are those are the big things they're very important. But as you say, they're massive undertakings. They're not just, you just can't solve those on your own. What do you think people can do on a personal level to help them process and get through this? What's a perspective, or what is something that you're clinging to where you're okay, this, as long as I focus on this, I'll be able to navigate through. I'll get through this. Is there anything specific?
I think the thing that I'm spending my time doing is thinking about like what do I have the power to do that's going to
Hmm.
make things better, and then I have to start doing that,
Hmm.
because it's so easy to sit and feel victimized by what happened and to be angry about it, to be angry at the people who voted this way, to know that we're all going to suffer because
Hmm.
of it. So, like, what you have to do something. You cannot just sit and complain, right? And then for everybody who didn't vote, right? Like, they've almost earned their suffering. You can't sit back and complain and not vote. But here we all, right? We're now paying for it. So what can you do? From my perspective, like one of my academic expertise is digital security, right? So like
Right.
I'm
Right.
plotting out my next week plan, right? What am I going to tell people to do? Because you're going to be surveilled much, much more deeply than you have been before with this administration. So like, let me give you a set of all the tools that you can use, and I'm going to tell you how to use them, and I'm going to help you protect yourself that way. That's a thing that I can do.
Yeah.
Um, what's your special power? Like, get out there and do that. The more action you're taking, the more empowered you feel. And like, I don't know if that's enough to solve the problem, but it's something. We
It's
cannot
something.
just sit and be complacent because they are going to take advantage of this power, and we have to use whatever we have to fight back against it.
Do you think the divide in America between MAGA and sanity is ever going to be smoothed out and smoothed over at all? Do you think it ever will be?
If you had asked me last week, I would have said probably,
Yeah.
because I thought Trump was going to lose, and
Yeah.
we've had these sorts of things in the U.S. before. We had like in the early-ish 2000s, we had a thing called the Tea Party,
Yeah.
um, and they were real prominent, and then they just sort of faded away, and a lot of them became MAGA, and I thought, all right, so we see Trump defeated this time, they kind of fade away.
Yeah.
And, it'll rise up again in another form, but we can have some kind of reconciliation. And
Yeah.
now what we're going to have is a lot of pain. Um, I don't know. I mean, I consider myself to be a person who goes out of her way to extend grace and forgiveness. And man, is it going to take me a long time to get there, because we're all going to see the pain that this is going to create. It'll take a couple years to really set in, but we're all going to feel it as these policies get enacted. And I don't know how I get to the place of forgiving that. I don't know.
As Shannon was saying, there's going to be a lot of people complaining about getting their faces eaten by leopards. There's going to
Yeah,
be,
there
you know,
sure are.
there's going to be a lot of, that blind, blissful ignorance is going to turn into hard, cold reality soon for some people. And they're, oh my God, it affects me too. And
Yeah.
that's frustrating. I mean, I don't know. I think I can confidently say I've never been in the presence of someone, not even in the same area as someone who's wearing a MAGA hat. Like that's that. And since 2016, it's never happened. Never in the States, in Canada. I've never seen it. I know they're there, but I've never seen it. And I just can't, like, I saw a picture this morning of, Wayne Gretzky and his wife and kids at the election night with Trump. And it's like, come on. I mean, it
Yeah.
boggles my mind. As I always say, it's like does these people, none of them seen Raiders of the Lost Ark to the end? No one watched the Nazis are the bad guys. Those guys like that are the bad guys.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I guess, I mean, I love the idea that, as you said, that, people need to just kind of focus on what their strengths are and be active. And I think that doesn't necessarily have to mean, well, it means you're going to have to go out and march, or you're going to have to be, whatever, there's participate in mass civil disobedience or something. Maybe it does. I don't know. That's up to you. But I think there's also ways is exactly, like using your platforms, talking to people, sharing information and making sure everyone knows as much as they need to know, in order to make the best decisions and then just keep moving. I mean, the one thing I was thinking today rather, before we spoke was that, before the election, the US election, we were all thinking and preparing ourselves, okay, it's going to take days. It's going to be tight. It's going to take days for this to be decided. And then it just seemed like, well, no, it's just decided. And then I realized this afternoon, I was thinking to myself going, well, you have to remember as well that history doesn't stop on election night. Like, stuff still happens. I'm not suggesting that there's going to be, election fraud or anything like that. Not necessarily whatever. But I mean, this things aren't static. It's not like boom, he's in, and that's just the way it is. It's like there's spanners in the works, there's molasses in the engine, there's all that kind of stuff where life refuses to stay static. Life refuses to just go one way smoothly.
Yeah.
good or bad. So that I take sort of some refuge in that, which I'm hoping others do as well. So you have a Substack. Can I share the Substack link? Is it magareport.news? Does that sound right to you?
Yes, and last week I was like, wow, I'm gonna have to like finish the MAGA
Finish it
report.
off.
I'm not gonna have any MAGA stuff to say anymore. So yeah, the MAGA report has been, people kind of worried about January 6th style violence. And I was like, okay, we're gonna pass the election, it'll all be fine. And so now it's really gonna focus on the violent threats within the movement, which there are a lot of, and I'm worried about, particularly against immigrant communities. Like on the forums I monitor, full threats of like days of murder and being paid per body of immigrant that you bring in. It's really violent. So how much of that manifests, I don't know, but I am the one who's reading it, so you don't have to. And that is the kind of thing I'm going to share there.
So is that going to be the bulk of the work that you've been doing the past number of months is going to show up on that Substack?
For now, I'm working on a book that is probably going to take about a year to write on the psychology of the MAGA movement. So if you're like, why do these people feel like this?
I can
tell you. I have a freshly minted psychology degree and a lot of experience. And so, now 200 hours of interviews. And so, the book is really going to be this sort of like scientific psychological look at like, how do people fall for authoritarianism and fascism? So, you'll get previews of it on the MAGA report, and the book will be out in whatever year and a half.
Amazing. Well, if you guys are watching live, make sure you click on that magareport.news. And if you're just listening or watching the podcast afterwards, it's magareport.news. And I promise you, it's the good kind of MAGA URL that you want to go to.
The only one.
That's not a trick. But thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate your time. And thank you for stopping in the jungles of Florida.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate it. Take care.
Thanks.